right, this Washington Post interview with this shadowed and hidden young man, he was not involved in the release of these documents, but he knows very well the guy who we're told worked at a military base, had a high technology knowledge base, was a gamer, we're told, and those with whom he shared this information were gamers as well on this so-called Discord site. And actually, more shockingly, a lot of this was being shared years ago. Now, we don't know whether it's all the material we're getting right now that actually goes back just a couple of months, but it does raise a whole lot of issues. And this community that seemed to know it, someone obviously didn't keep it secret, and it got out. But I wonder what Mike Pompeo makes of this, the former Secretary of State, who's kind enough to join us. Secretary, what do you make of this? You know, these things always seem to get bizarre, but this is really bizarre. A gamer with military ties to a base, and on we go. What do you think?
So, Neil, it is bizarre. I think there's still a ton we don't know. One might not accept precisely what that young person said as completely accurate, true, painting the full picture. There's still lots of pieces of this that need to be peeled back. But what we have seen is a handful of documents. The current administration appears to think these are, at least some of them, authentic. And so there was a leak. And, you know, the substance of these things so far, not particularly devastating, right? We see that the Ukrainians are running short on ammunition. The world knew that. Frankly, this is one of the things I've criticized President Biden for, is he hasn't provided the tools the Ukrainians actually need to be victorious. But the risk to the United States intelligence, the capacity to continue to collect intelligence is very real. If your future assets or your future friends who you need assistance from can't trust that you can keep your secrets, keep classified information where it ought to be, the ability to perform these important intelligence functions is diminished. So I think there's real risk of that for sure. I think the administration hasn't seen the end of this. My guess is it's a lot like my wife's shoe closet. There are more shoes to drop. And I've been involved in a handful of these that we were cleaning up from Director Brennan's time at CIA to get to the full scope of what was actually there, what had been leaked, what had moved outside of the intelligence community into an unclassified space was very hard for us to get our hands around.
Still, what I was shocked to learn is that, you know, potentially hundreds of thousands, more than 200,000, would be able to get access to data like this. Not exclusively this, so I'm sure the audience is potentially much smaller. But I am worried. I could see someone like you having that in your positions in the Trump administration and prior. But it sounds like a lot of people, both here and in some foreign operations, do get access to this sort of thing. And of course, in this case, it was a bunch of gamers who were given access to this. They weren't part of that crowd, but they grew to be. That seems in need of tightening up.
You know, I could not agree with you more. Put aside the fact that it got outside the classified space. Those folks obviously shouldn't have it. But I was always amazed. And sometimes it was innocent things. They weren't even classified, but things that leaked to the Post or the New York Times on my watch. I would say, okay, we got to find out who did this. And immediately, or within an hour, I'd get back, sir, we had 11,000 people who saw this, right? It could be potentially huge numbers of people. Sometimes these were, you know, broadly disseminated documents, but oftentimes I saw lots of information that, you know, somebody might have the right clearance, but they had absolutely no need to know. They were someone that we had to go check off that they weren't the leaker. We absolutely tried to tighten that down, but there's still an amazing amount of work that needs to be done. Too many people seeing too much information always increases the risk exponentially, Neil.
And we're sloppy with this stuff. If you talk about the documents that have been found in Joe Biden's garage and all those that were found at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump and, of course, extending to Vice President Pence and all, we can't seem to keep secrets.
You know, Neil, we do have a problem with this, but I will say most of the most important secrets that I saw in my time as CIA director, we were able to keep inside. So the American people should know we actually do a reasonable job of this. But what has happened, right, whether it was the Vault 7 leaks from the Central Intelligence Agency, the work that Snowden was able to do, we can go through handfuls of cases over the past decades where information got where it shouldn't be. Everybody involved in this, every human being, needs to make sure that they're doing this right. We need to make sure we have systems and processes that protect this. How this stuff got to Mar-a-Lago, to the garage next to Joe Biden's Corvette, sounds like a document ended up in the streets in Ireland yesterday.
Right, that's right. I forgot about it. Yeah.
This is This is dangerous stuff, and the responsibility of every individual to get this right is real, and the duty of government to hold those accountable who fail to deliver on that level of security needs to match that threat.
Obviously we don't and can't ascertain the truthfulness of all of the material that's come out, but there are enough consistencies with what we've heard, certainly even in the general press, concern over the longevity of Ukraine's fight and counteroffensive it plans for later in the spring, and whether it's up to that or it's running out of key supplies. Does that worry you? That's that come to light right now, and it's sort of planted new doubts that Ukraine can't make it for the long fight?
Neil, I was in Ukraine. It's been about 10 days ago now. And the thing that they said they needed most was 155 rounds ammunition, right? Simple artillery, not high-tech stuff, just the capability to continue to perform the air defense function and to fire artillery as the Russians were trying to advance in Bakhmut in the region. The Russians are having similar problems. They've got massive supply chain problems. They are losing people at a rate that is absolutely staggering. Both sides are expending huge human resources and physical resources in this conflict. It's why my judgment is that the quickest way to bring this to a conclusion, the way that this ends most quickly, is to restore the very deterrence the Biden administration lost. The cheapest way, I hear Americans say, gosh, we can't spend this money. If Vladimir Putin controls Kyiv, this will cost the United States far more than providing the Ukrainian people with the tools they need to convince Putin that this war isn't worth continuing. That should be the path. Biden has dribbled this out far too slowly. Had we gotten on this in a serious way, perhaps we wouldn't be where we are today, Neil.
We talk about Ukraine and the focus on that, but I did want to switch gears, Secretary, and talk about Emmanuel Macron and what he had to say about apparently our fixation. I don't want to mischaracterize what he said with Taiwan and China and all of that, that's a U.S. issue. I caught up with Liz Truss yesterday, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, who took issue with that, and Emmanuel Macron essentially throwing Western powers under the bus. What did you make of what he said?
Oh, goodness. I've spent a lot of time with President Macron. He's always had a little bit of resentment towards the United States. I would remind him the best way to make sure that the U.S. doesn't have to do the work we're doing in Europe is to do it yourself. And we would encourage him. We encourage the Germans to do the same. It was galling to see the remarks he made. And by the way, it was ignorant. Make no mistake, this problem from the Chinese Communist Party isn't a conflict between the United States and China. It is an effort by Xi Jinping to dominate the entire world, and that certainly includes Europe. Liz Truss, some of the others in Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, the EU president, made some remarks that were exactly the opposite of those that Macron made. Most of Europe understands this risk in a way that is serious. I hope they will begin to expend their resources in a way that matches what they know the threat is from the Chinese Communist Party.
Because they seem to be focused, and not universally. Some of them, are complaining a little bit about the ongoing war in Ukraine and having to continue funding it, nothing to the degree that we are or, nations like Poland are. But the fact of the matter is they don't seem as concerned with Taiwan. So maybe Emmanuel Macron, said what they're thinking. Taiwan isn't our issue. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible that he's playing to some political base inside of his own party or inside of France, but he knows better. He knows that the Chinese Communist Party is infiltrating his country in the same way that they're working in American universities. He knows that they've stolen billions of dollars worth of French intellectual property in the way they have stolen tens of billions of dollars of American intellectual property. President Macron's plenty smart enough to know that this coming confrontation, not brought on by the United States, brought on by Xi Jinping in China. This coming confrontation is real and serious, and neither France nor broader Europe will escape this threat, and we're going to have to figure out a way to confront it together. I'm confident that the Europeans will come to see it that way too, and they'll begin to work alongside of us, the Australians, the Japanese, the South Koreans, every nation that understands the threat from China in the way that we do. They'll be with us.
Secretary, while I have you, we always veer into politics. I know you eschew discussing whether you're going to make a presidential run. A lot of your big fans and supporters hope you do. But I only say it in the context of some of the fast-moving poll developments we've seen, including for Donald Trump, even in the face of these indictments, the first for a former president ever. His popularity's gone up, and his money-raising skills have gone up amazingly. So I think close to $15 million his campaign has gotten since the indictment first went down. Now, Asa Hutchinson, who just joined the race, sir, has said he understands overzealous prosecutor criticisms that Republicans have, had thrown at Alvin Bragg, but he still thinks that it's bad enough, given all the controversy and more controversies and possible indictments to come in other investigations, including the former president's role in the Georgia recount, whatever activity he might have had to spur the attacks on the Capitol on January 6th, classified documents, you name it, that he should step down, that he should quit running for president. What do you think of that?
I think everyone who's thinking about this themselves has to sort that out for themselves. And then the American people, in the first instance, Republican caucus goers and primary voters, get to sort it out. I don't think it's for any of us to say Sally or Pete or John or President Trump should or shouldn't run for president. Everyone's got to make that decision. I'm confident President Trump's been pretty clear about what he intends to do. I also have equal confidence that the American people will be serious about thinking about what kind of leader, who do they want to lead this country through what is an incredibly tumultuous time, not only abroad, but we've got problems here at home too, Neil.
But there is going to be a candidate debate for him in August. You might be a part of that if you choose to run. Do you think that's a fair issue to raise when you're on that stage with Donald Trump?
I like winning. I like America to win. I like our party to win. I believe conservative ideas matter. I think in that sense, nothing's off the table in terms of bringing up issues that are relevant to driving America forward. Everything's on the table in that debate. And I'm confident, Neil, you know this too, you've seen these debates. I'm pretty confident that everything will be on the table.
All right, because Chris Christie has said, who also might join that race, a lot of people who might, so I'm probably taking way too many leaps, that Donald Trump is the only candidate who cannot beat Joe Biden. What do you think of that?
Unknowable. We're still a year and a half off from that election in the fall of 2024. Unknowable who can win, who can't win. Unknowable if President Biden will even be the Democrat nominee. I think there's still a long way to go, and I always have confidence in the American people. They usually get it right. They didn't, sadly, in 2020. They've led us down a path, but I'm confident the American people will get it right in 2024.
All right. As you know, the Republican Party is hoping that anyone who participates in that debate will agree that whoever is nominated by the Republican voting base would be supported by all candidates. It's not a litmus test. If she had her druthers, she would prefer that. Do you think that should be the case? If you ran, would you support the Republican nominee, even if you don't run?
I cannot imagine supporting President Biden or a Democrat to lead this country forward. It just seems incomprehensible to me, Neil. I've been in the conservative movement for my entire adult life. To think I'm going to vary from that in 2024 seems ludicrous.
President Trump has not said the same himself. Does that worry you?
Everybody gets to make their own choices, and I think the American people get to evaluate that. Do you believe that a conservative is better than a progressive liberal, no matter who embodies those positions? I think that ought to be a pretty simple question for everyone to answer. I hope every Republican, including President Trump, will do that.
Got it. We'll watch and we'll follow closely. Always good catching up with you, Secretary. Thank you, and to your service.
Thank you, Neil. Have a great day, sir.
You too.